Hey, welcome to another episode of Dave's Imaginations. Today, three things. First, we're going to talk about how our wizard found his patron. So we'll go through how we figured that out for our wizard. Then we're going to talk about how our cleric determined his deity. We'll go through that. And then finally, we'll go through our recap from part 2 of Sailors on the Starless Sea, our live presentation of Sailors on the Starless Sea that we did Thursday, April 6th. We're going to go through all that and a little more right after this. Stay with me. So, before we get into the recap, two things. First, something I missed from last week. So not this week, but last week we figured out who the patron would be for our wizard. So in the wizard space in the Dungeon Crawl Classic role-playing game, 8th printing, in the wizard section, it talks about the wizards get their powers from supernatural patrons. They weave the magic spells in consultation with powers from supernatural places. And they go through this whole list. And so to invoke a patron, the wizard must spell burn at least 1 point of an ability score and cast this invoke patron spell. There may be additional requirements, but to do that, you need to know who your patron is. And so this doesn't really give us much of a list. So I went to Google. And from Google, I just did a search on DCC Wizard Patrons. And found this third one, Dungeon Crawl Classic Patron Finder. That sounded like exactly what we wanted. I clicked on that, and I came up with this huge list of patrons. And it turns out there were 6 pages. So I had my player roll a d6, and he rolled a 2. And so I went down 1, 2, and then I had him roll 2d20 because there's about 40 lines on this. And so he rolled, I think it was a 27, and he came up with Gloriana, the Fairy Godmother. Which, come on, that sounds like a ton of fun for our wizard to have a fairy godmother. So you click on this link and it takes you into this other website, and there was some module that came out, Angels, Demons, and Beings Between, Volume 2, Elfland Edition, and it gives you a whole bunch of information. But down in here somewhere, if we scroll through this, we would find that we have Gloriana. Gloria. As our players start singing Gloria, Gloria from the 1980s song. Right? So Gloriana, the Fairy Godmother, and by Daniel Bishop. Many of the fairy folk take a sidelong interest in human affairs. Often this interest lasts but for an encounter, but sometimes a fairy interest in the aeons-long existence of the Fae. Such a creature is Gloriana, who sometimes aids wizards and elves and has become the godmother of several mortal children, both with and without a formal patron bond spell. So that is who we ended up doing. I loved it. So much so that I went and I looked up this book, and I found, though, this book was only available. I found it on RPG Guild, but it's only available in print. And I prefer to have PDFs. I don't like clogging. I know I'm in the minority in this. A lot of people love to collect all their D&D stuff. I don't have room. I don't desire to have room. But I may or may not have broke down and bought this just so my guy could have more detail on his Patreon. So we'll have to see how he digs into that in the future. We go over as our cleric. Our cleric had to pick a deity. And under the cleric section, it says choosing a god, and the first question is, do you want to be lawful, neutral, or chaotic? And I said, you know what, guys, chaos in this game kind of is evil. In my opinion, that's what it seems like. Chaos seems to align with evil, and I don't want to play evil games. So you're either going to be lawful or neutral, and most of our people came from villages, and they decided that, you know what, they're probably lawful. Whether they're truly ultimately lawful or not, I don't know, but they lean to the law. They obey the laws of the land, right? So they were going to do lawful. That plus it matters in the cleric space of how well you're healed if they're all the same, and they all wanted a good healing. So to choose a god, though, we went down to the cleric table and the gods of the eternal struggle. Since we knew we wanted to be lawful, I had him roll a d8, And sure enough, he rolled a Aristemis, the insightful one, demigoddess of choosing. And so with that, I also rolled. With that, I did a Google search, and in the Google search, we found this article by Vil Rockula from the Knights in the North blog, and it gives a full detail of who Aristemis is. Before we read this, Aristemis is the goddess of sophistication, not the crude material kind, but the sublime strategy of the mind and soul. It is the goddess of civilization of the societies which rely on the wisdoms of its elders and the diligence of its workers to thrive. On the other hand, it is worshipped in the deepest reaches of the forests and mountain ranges, where hermits live off land and sit in their divine postures. I wonder if that's really supposed to be pastures. Divine pastures to see glimpses of cryptic nature of their own inner reality. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's a whole backstory, a lot of information. This is what's most important, though. The line deities, all right? These are the ones, these are your buddies, Nekthalos and Koranus, and then the Posey. And then I suppose this is probably the most, because in the healing, you don't want to deal with and you don't want to upset your deity. And so you don't want to work with Cezrican or the great god Morgan or Criosax, the goddess of excess. And then probably the most information, it gives you the information that Aristemis is the symbol is a bow and the weapon proficiency. So because of this deity, you get an additional proficiency, a proficiency with bows. So that's kind of cool. And special clerics of Aristemis may be granted the following spells. So in addition to all of your other spells, you would also get Holy Sanctuary and Second Sight. These are pretty cool things when you drill into your god that you can get. Now, this is third party. This is not a Dungeon Crawl Classic product, I don't believe, right? This seems to be a product of that blog's, but I like it, and I think we'll go run with it. And then he gives its own disapproval chart. So my player, if you're watching this and you see this, you might want to have this download, and if you would prefer, we'll play with this disapproval chart. If that ever, not that your cleric would ever have a disapproval. So the last thing I would say here is this: Aristemis is I did image searches and background searches. It, to me, is an obvious take on the Greek goddess of Aristemis, and is very similar in styling. They both are bows and nature oriented. So that is Artemis. Artemis is the name of the Greek goddess. So that is the second point. Now we will transition to. Now we talk about our recap from last night. That is Thursday, April 6th, was we played the second part of Sailors of the Starless Sea. Now, full disclosure, I expected we would have been done last night. We didn't make it. So, but the previous week, not this week, but the previous week, we had ended in the ruined keep. Our party had been recruited by locals, their neighboring village, that their people had been taken captive, and they've tracked them back to this abandoned keep, and they had sent a posse. The mayor went with a posse to recover them, but they haven't come back. And furthermore, worse yet, more people have gone missing. Oh, please, my adventurers, won't you help? And that, plus they had a posse. So this was a level, another funnel. And so to help my characters out, I gave them each 2 more henchmen. Now remember, I have five players, so that gives me a total of 3 times 5 is 15, which, according to the background, the summary of this book, should be plenty of them to survive. But so they went in. They went in and we gave them the map. We gave them the outline of the map anyway. So they had some general ideas. They could go through the front, go through the back, through this broken down wall. They decided to go down this broken wall. And as they're going through that, a lot of them would have died had they not used up their luck. But their guy that took them here did actually perish. That was the Reginald character that I had rolled up. And within the keep, they did the well encounter. They did the pit encounter. They did the room encounter, but eventually they made it to the remaining structure of the tower of the keep, the one good room, it seemed like, of the tower. And then when they went in there, they had their butts handed to them as they were ambushed by a group of beastmen. So they went in there, and the beastmen were waiting in the shadows, and as most of them got in there, the beastmen rained down their spears on them and took out 6 of their 15 players, and quite damaging. But the battle ensued, and eventually the battle ended. The battle ended with our wizard casting a pretty powerful, actually cast twice, sleep spell that first took out 2 of them, 2 of the beastmen that were left, and then cast it again to finally put to sleep the final remaining beastman. And he cast that with a pretty high score that they would be asleep for not just minutes, but hours, or rounds, but hours. And that is where we picked up from last night. We started off last night with 3 of the beastmen asleep, and dead bodies were everywhere. And we ransacked, we looted all the bodies, and we decided to make our way through the door to the 2nd level. I had our thief go ahead and pick that, and we went down into underneath the keep. Underneath the keep, they went down the stairs, and they had this long hallway with doors on either side. The first door on the right was very heavy, and it took 3 people to open it. And when they finally did, they went in there, and they found that this dead body with this beautiful axe on his chest. However, there was a barrier of ice that they thought would take a long time to chip through, so they decided to leave that be. Meanwhile, another part of the group went into this room with a treasure chest, and this was actually our dwarven chest maker went in there and checked it out, and was able to determine that the chest had a false bottom, and instead of trying to open it, he bashed it with his axe, totally getting around the little trap that was in there, and so but he got some coins from that. And it was fun because the dwarf actually got to use his sniff for gold ability. And then with both those things done, while those 2 things were happening, another group went into this long hall that had the pool with, I had skulls with glowing green eyes in the bottom, this hall with alcoves of cloaks. And as people looked into the pool, the skulls rose up with the green eyes glowing, and they'd pick up the skull, and they had to do a willpower check, and a couple of them failed and tried to crawl into the water, and one was pulled back, but this barber decided to jump in, and he swam to the bottom, and there was a portal to some valve that he was open, and that valve didn't just open a hole for it to drain out. No, it collapsed the floor, and everything flushed out, almost like a giant toilet, right? It flushed out, but the barber then was lost, gone. And so the rest of the party decided to just press forward and see what they would see as they went down the long corridor, and eventually came to steps into a beach with a menor? I don't know. And as they got to the steps, they could hear someone falling out of a hole and onto the ground and falling dead. And they went to investigate, and sure enough, the barber had fallen through and had broke his neck. But not before he had searched a side room, which we skipped entirely a room, but we had this one character that did it, and they found a ring in this valuable ring in this barber's hand. So they have that ring, and then with that done, and they look across this starless sea, as it were, they had the dragon boat appear, and they could see tentacles off in the distance, and they were well warned, because in the previous room actually, before there were murals on this wall. There's murals on this wall depicting a dude on that menhir looking over the Starless Sea with tentacles coming out of it. They could also see a sacrificial table with some dark, chaotic person doing some sort of sacrifice, and then they could see these sacrifice lords leading beastmen in battle. So they had that for warning, and then when they got down to the Starless Sea, it came true, and we could see that we have this dragon boat out in the water. They eventually figured out to climb up on top of this menhir, and now I replaced the candle with a brazier. And that was largely because the brazier was easier for me to add to the map, and it was easier to see than just a simple candle. So we had them go in, and they went up and they lit the brazier, and when they did, when they did the, I think I even have it. Yeah, there he goes. When they lit the brazier, it turned green, and the boat came to shore, and everyone got on the boat. Everyone got on the boat, and when they did, the boat started floating off into the sea toward this island where they could hear the drums in the background. And when they got halfway, sure enough, the Leviathan attacked. Now the Leviathan attacked. Now they had pulled the robes. They pulled 3 of the robes. They had pulled 3 of the robes from the alcoves and were wearing them. And those 3 were protected from the Leviathan. However, the other 5 were not. And those other 5, I had them compare luck, and there was 2 of them that had a luck of 3, and I had them roll off to see which one was the poor sap that would be the sacrifice to the Leviathan. As the Leviathan, they had each of my players had dove to the bottom of the boat, grasping for their lives. One of them had tried to slip underneath the robes of someone that was already wearing it, but the Leviathan was smart in that and grabbed them and pulled them with its mighty strength from the boat and started shaking them above the water. And then I rolled to see who would be the sacrifice. Who would be the sacrifice to the Leviathan? And we lost our caravan. Our caravan guard. Now, that was the sole character left for one of our players, so we'll have to see how he is replaced. And we lost our caravan guard now, but the others were not out of the woods yet, as our dwarf and our butcher both had armor on and heavy gear. Our dwarf even had a chain, and so they had to quickly take off all their gear, drop everything they needed to drop so that they could swim back up to the surface. And so with that, they came back to the surface. Now, I did say that the spears that they had did float. They're mostly wood, right? And the chest maker, actually, he was carrying some wood, so all of that floated to the surface also. But to grab the rope and keep a hold of the spear, that was a dramatic moment. As the dwarf floats back to the water, he needed to roll a luck check. Now there's 2 types of luck checks. I've seen you have to roll your luck or less to make the roll is one type of luck check. But in this book it says, hey, make them roll a DC 15 luck check. Okay. There's 2 types of luck checks. So this one was the meet it or go below check, and his luck was at a 3. So he needed to roll a 3 or less, which I think might have been a 4 or less, because he rolled a 3, and he was able to grab his spear, and they pulled him back to the boat. And then the boat went the rest of the way to the ziggurat. And they approached, and I gave them the description. And let's just jump to that description now. Yeah, as the boat approached the Temple of Chaos, the island draws closer, revealing the source of the golden glow, a towering ziggurat with burning light radiating from within the silver-thin cracks between its massive stone blocks. A wide ramp circles the edifice, sloping to the top of the temple. Hordes of beastmen crowd the ramp, howling to the darkness, hammering on massive hide drums, and pushing a terrified string of prisoners to the ziggurat's glowing peak. High atop the temple, you can make out a fearsome silhouette of an enormous armored figure wreathed in infernal smoke lit from below. And he showed them this picture. Show them this picture. And so they're on this boat and they're leading up to it, and they're starting like, what the heck are we doing? How are we going to save them? A band of 7 remaining, some of them without their armor, with spears and not much more. And I did depict, as I jump back over to my map, I did add to the map a cage with one person, and this is going to be our player's new character. This was I believe it was a blacksmith. There's a blacksmith in a cave, and in a pile next to the cage was his hammer, I believe it was, and maybe some tongs. But right next to it is this beastman, this monkey-ish beastman. So they'll have to figure that out. Now, all the attention is drawn to the top of this of the ziggurat as they float up. And so we will start next week with, what are they going to do? How are they going to approach us? There's 20 plus of these beastmen. Are they going to take them on one after another? How are they going to defeat this and save the townsfolk from being sacrificed to this chaos? Save the village people from the chaos, from being sacrificed to this chaos lord. If you have ideas, what if you've played this, what did you do? Put that in the comments. I'm sure my players would love to know what your thoughts are if you're watching this. If I have someone that other than my players watching this, my players, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to survive all these beastmen, let alone a chaos lord? Oh my goodness, we'll have to see. We'll resolve that and a lot more. But before I let you go, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Yeah, feeds my ego, right? And if you leave a comment, I will make sure to leave it. I'll respond. Either I'll like it or I'll respond. If you have a question, I will certainly try to answer it. So leave your comment, hit that like, subscribe, and if you hit that notification bell, that'd be cool too. And then next week we will certainly resolve the sailors on the Starless Sea. And then we'll have to see where we go from there. And then until next time.